Hi everybody. Welcome to the Geelong Library and Heritage Centre. My name is Rhett Davis and I'm very pleased to have been invited to facilitate this evening's conversation with Mark Smith, discussing this beautiful thing, Where Truth Ends, his latest book. First, I'd like to acknowledge the Wadawurrung people of the Kulin Nation and the Gulajan and Gadabanud peoples of the Maar Nations as the original owners of the lands on which our library services operate. We pay respects to elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge and celebrate First Nations peoples of this land as the custodians of learning, literacy, knowledge and story. Just a quick bit of housekeeping before we start. Tonight's event is being recorded. If you'd like to revisit the discussion or share it with friends and family, it will be available on the library's YouTube channel in the coming days. If you have any concerns about the recording, please let staff know now. No hands? Okay, good. We'll also leave time for audience questions at the end, so if you have any burning questions for Mark, have a think now. On to the main event. Mark Smith is an award-winning local author of 4 young adult novels, including the highly acclaimed Winter trilogy. He has written award-winning short fiction and has also curated 2 short story anthologies. His adult fiction debut, 3 Boys Gone, was a bestseller. His new novel, Where Truth Ends, is a book that I devoured in a couple of days. It's a fast-paced, riveting eco-political thriller, and dare I say it, a little angry, in a good way, There are lots of other things I could say about Mark, but I just will add that he's also one of the best literary citizens we have in this country, and it's a pleasure for me to be able to host him for a change. Please join me in welcoming Mark Smith. Okay, Mark, we'll do the thing where we start. For those who haven't read Where Truth Ends, which is possibly a few of you, can you give us the setup? Give us a bit of a spiel.
Sure. So Where Truth Ends follows a young climate activist. Her name is Meg Ma, and Meg gets involved with a highly secretive organisation, activist group called No Planet B. Inside No Planet B, nobody knows anybody. They're all anonymous to each other. So when they have their first major action, which takes place on the corner of Flinders Street and Swanson Street, they blockade the intersection with the truck and they jump out of the truck. They're all dressed in hazmat suits, goggles, masks, and Meg is one of these young people in the back of the truck. And they're chanting and they've got their flares and they've got banners coming off the side of the truck. And then on a given signal, they all disperse. They run in different directions. They scatter into the city. And Meg does that. She ditches her disguise. She slips back into the city. And then 20 minutes after the end of the demonstration, the truck explodes. And so Meg is then being hunted as a terrorist, rather than just as an activist, but as a terrorist. So she has to figure out what the hell she's going to do.
And it's very immediate, isn't it? That sort of starts very quickly. And one of the things that struck me very early on is how localised it is there, right? So we're in Melbourne, we're in Flinders Street. If you know these places, and Meg really has to sort of deal with very sort of clear local stuff there. I'm going to jump ahead in my questions here because I'm interested in how you actually dealt with the local there, because you really do follow her as she's trying to escape this kind of this net in some ways. Did you walk this journey?
So Meg has to escape the city as it's being shut down and blockaded by the police. And so I did actually go and walk the routes. How the hell would you do this? So she escapes across Fed Square and she drops down onto the river, and you can actually go there. There's a garden down the bottom there at the back of the racing museum, and you can get into the trees there. And so I thought, well, that's where she's going to get rid of her disguise. She dumps her disguise there, and I thought, well, what's she going to do? So I decided that she worked at the Acme Museum. And so she just simply walked around the front and she registered for work that morning. But then as the city was being shut down, she had to get out. The thing is then, one of the key themes of the book is all about surveillance, the way in which we are watched everywhere. everything that we do is being watched and tracked and traced. So I thought, well, how does she get out without being noticed? You can actually download, as I discovered, you can download in where all of the CCTV cameras are in the CBD in Melbourne, where they go along the Yarra River, where they, around the MCG, around the tennis centre. That's the way I had her go out. But she was back in the civvies by then, so she wasn't drawing attention to herself. She just evacuated the city with everybody else. Unfortunately, then she encountered the police roadblock. So that's where the plot really starts to move.
Where did the book kind of begin for you? Is there one sort of place? Was it an idea? Was it her? Is it more about the bigger idea around the book that it started? Where did it start?
The initial idea was something completely different, and this is something about writing a book that a lot of writers understand, is that books kind of evolve as you write them, and I actually believe that they reveal themselves to you as you write them. So at the time when I was thinking about this book, I've got a mate, and she had the job of the river keeper. There is an actual job called the river keeper on the Yarra River, on the Birrarung. And I thought, river keeper, that's really interesting. So she took me out on a little solar-powered boat for a day, and we went up and down. We saw the little floating wetlands and that they'd established, and she talked about pollution in the river and, where the litter traps were and all of that sort of stuff. So when I began writing this book, I had this working title, and the working title was The River Keeper's Daughter, which I still really like, but the publisher didn't like, so it didn't sound enough like a thriller. So that's where it began, and I wanted, at the core of the novel, I wanted to be this father-daughter relationship, because Meg's dad in the book is actually the river keeper on the Birrarung, and that's the way she escapes the city. She goes via the river on his little solar-powered boat, and they get up without him knowing at all what she's been involved in. So there's that aspect of it. There's also that it's something that I've been wanting to write about for a long time. I've been an environmental activist, social activist for 40 years. And so that began for me back in the 80s. My introduction to it was going out to Roxby Downs in the middle of the desert and being arrested and being beaten up by the police in Andamuka Police Station and rammed off the road as we were trying to escape town. That was my introduction to activism when I was back in my 20s, and it kind of rolled from there. So you can probably name any environmental cause over the last 40 years, and I've been involved in it somehow. I have that very strong belief that it's a great saying that if you don't have a seat at the table, you're on the menu. So if you don't have a seat at the table, if you're not engaged, if you're not taking part and being part of the decision-making in some way or influencing the decision-making, then you're on the menu. And hasn't just been environmental issues. I won't point out, so there's someone in the audience here that I remember back when the bicentennial was, that 1988. So I remember driving around Geelong with this person at 3 o'clock in the morning, and we had these stencils made up, which was pay the rent. And every bicentennial sign in Geelong we found, and we stenciled this pay the rent over the top of it for Indigenous rights. So little things like that, which I've always felt as though I've wanted to be involved in how those decisions are made, influencing decision making as much as possible. And the only way that I could do that is through action. So that's probably where it began way back then.
You're a lot more hardcore than I thought you were, doing stencils and so forth. I'd like to talk a bit more about that, but I sort of want to just quickly go back to the idea of Meg and her father, Luke. The novel sort of sets them against each other a little bit without getting into too much sort of spoiler sort of stuff. But they've really got the same environmental goal. He's a river keeper. The goal is the same, but they sort of clash more over the method. Where does Meg's environmentalism kind of branch off from Luke's? And is this sort of like a generational thing in your eyes, or is this something else?
I think it's very much a generational thing. So Luke is what I call an inside the tent environmentalist. So he is used to working within established structures, whether that's making submissions to parliamentary inquiries or, is involved in working bees and weeding bees along the river and engaging with community groups and things like that. So very much a hands-on, inside the tent conservationist. Meg, as I think, Meg probably best described as a millennial, and Meg, and I think this is true of a lot of millennials, I think they have lost faith in those structures. Completely lost faith in those structures, and they're looking for answers outside because those institutions have failed them, have utterly failed them, and they've failed their generation and generations to come. So no wonder they look for more extreme means of action, and groups like No Planet B. So there is an intergenerational difference there that I really want to play on. It was easy to write. It was really easy to write because they're having these arguments, father and daughter having these arguments about not about what the overall goal is, like you say, but about methods. How's it actually going to happen? And Meg just says, look, everything that you have done for all of your good intentions has failed. So we've got to try something else.
So the novel's obviously set around this climate protest that's going wrong, and sort of also asks difficult questions about, whose side government is on, and these institutions, such as the police and so forth. You're never really very didactic about it in the book, I don't think, and you're not preachy. But as readers, I think we sort of quickly become a bit paranoid along with Meg, really. We sort of see her paranoia creep in as she sort of goes through the book. This is a big question, but are we right to be paranoid of these powerful institutions such as government and the police? Or is it too big a question?
No, it's not too big a question, but I think it's when you ask a question like that, it's easy to understand how that slips over into paranoia and into conspiracy theories, and I don't go down that route at all. But I think that it's a big question. Meg is not a conspiracy theorist. She is someone who actually thinks that there is still hope, but like I said, the means have got to be different. So I think that we've tried that idea of. Does anyone remember in WA? So there were a group of activists who were going to spray paint the front of Meg O'Neill's house. They found out where she lived. She's the CEO of Woodside, and they were tipped off somehow. And police were there. They were arrested. They were arrested as terrorists under terrorism charges, and they were going to paint the front of the fence. And that got me thinking about this idea of where responsibility for what is happening lies. Where does it lie? And too often we talked about this in the green room, is that it falls at the feet of corporations. But corporations don't exist without people. And so there's a quote by a guy named Utah Phillips, who was a singer-songwriter and union activist in the US. He passed away relatively recently. And what he said was, the planet isn't dying, the planet is being killed, and the people responsible have names and addresses. This is where Meg is coming from. Meg is saying, hang on, it's not corporations, it's people. Who are these people, and how do we expose them? How do we name and shame them for what they are doing effectively to generations to come? So whether that's can be effective or not, but you mentioned police before. I mean, police were wholly on the side of Woodside there because they arrested those activists, they took them into custody, and they went through the ringer as well. So those established structures will be on the side of the status quo, but is it effective to operate outside the status quo, I guess, is what Meg is, and writing that again was a really interesting area to explore. And everything that happens in the book is not Mark Smith, it's not necessarily my views, but I wanted my characters to be expressing different views.
Yeah, and we're having a lot of conversation, obviously, in this country about the right way to protest, right? And this, with your experience in this space and being possibly a little devilish at various times, is peaceful, polite protest less effective than one in which people are more inconvenienced? I know I'm getting you on some really tough questions here, but
happy to go there. As far as I'm concerned, if you have to apply to the government and to the police to hold a protest, to tell them where you're going to walk, where you're going to set up, that's not a protest. That's just playing by their game. And Meg actually exposes this, one of her speeches in the book, where she says, you go along, you have your protest, you finish by lunchtime, you go to a nice cafe for a coffee, and then you go home. And you feel better about yourself, but nothing has actually changed. Because Monday morning, how many times have you seen after a large demonstration where the police say, oh, the protesters were really well behaved and we're really pleased with that, with the organisation, which means, in fact, that no disruption has actually happened and that hasn't achieved a great deal. But the other side of the coin, again, that Meg highlights is, but hang on, I've been part of so many of those big demonstrations, and they aren't pointless, because the most important thing that they do is that they show you that you're not alone. You actually go back, you go home energised to continue to fight, because you're not isolated. You're part of this much, much larger community, and there's so many other people that think the same way you do. It can be a little bit scary at times, because I was at a big demonstration early this year when the President of Israel came to Australia. Remember, Herzog, and there was a huge demonstration, and where was it? It was on the corner. It was right outside Flinders Street Station. So it was Swanston Street and Flinders Street, and I'm standing up there on the steps of the cathedral thinking, Jesus, I hope, life doesn't imitate art here, because we're all in trouble. Anything goes off here.
I went to a protest at State Parliament, a very, very big one, a little while ago, or a few years ago now. But I'm as a pretty recalcitrant activist who thinks a lot of stuff but doesn't actually do them. I was staggered at the size of it. First of all, it was a huge, huge protest. One of the things that really stood out to me was this, and I had no idea because I hadn't been to these things before, is on the steps of Parliament we had obviously the line of police, and we had cameras, like really long telescopic lenses pointing at the crowd, and for me, I tried to work out, in my naivety, what that was about really, and obviously for me it was probably intimidation more than anything else. Have you experienced that? Is that something that?
Yeah, it was really prevalent, especially the really big demonstrations. And back in the days before mobile phones, so everyone was taking photos with big cameras anyway. But we used to joke, and it probably wasn't a joke, that there's another photo for the ASIO file. Because if you're turning up at demonstration after demonstration after demonstration, they're starting to piece together what's the common link in these things. And so, yes, I think we were surveilled. I think we were. I'd never heard anything. No one came knocking on the door in the middle of the night or anything like that. But I'm pretty sure that, and it would probably be within their remit to do that too.
Just on that surveillance sort of stuff, you talked about all the cameras, and you obviously got a PDF of all the cameras, I suspect, and mapped it all out. It's interesting for me how you do that as a novelist, because we often complain as novelists that technology ruins a lot of our plot points. Like, we've all got mobile phones now, we can solve something really quickly. So why do we need all this drama? But I think you've done something really skillfully here, in the sense that you've used all this technology to clearly sort of tighten the net around Meg. I'm just interested in how you sort of consciously did that as a writer. How are you working through that?
You're exactly right. You're right. Technology has made it difficult in terms of creating a believable narrative because information is so readily available. We've got it right in our pocket instantaneously. What Meg chooses to do is to not to drop off the grid, but to leave a false trail, to actually use her phone and to use a credit card, but be selective about where she does it and create a false trail. Basically, look, everything is normal. This is what normal life is, and it's not until she drops off the grid, takes part in those demonstrations, and then pops back on again. In terms of the writing of it, I think you either lean into the technology or you try and get it out of the book altogether. And that's why I think of the number of, especially cosy crime stuff now that's written in the 1980s. It's set in the 1980s or the 1990s. So, that's an excuse for not having the technology there. But I decided that we wanted to make this book as current as possible. It's set in 2026. It's set in an election year in Victoria. And so there's the political ramifications for the government of the day as well, and how they manipulate this, what they see as an attack for their own political ends. It was a complicated and complex book to write in that regard, because you end up you're trying to just not have those plot holes. Where people are going to say, well, why wouldn't they, why wouldn't you do this, why wouldn't you do that? But Meg's a millennial. She's watching, she's got those feeds in her hand the whole time because she wants to know what's happening. And the book happens pretty much in real time. So everything in the book takes place in 5 days. So you are spooling through this as a reader at pretty much the same speed as Meg is. And I think that's, in terms of writing a thriller, that's really important, it's a good way of grabbing your audience and not letting them go.
While we're talking about thrillers, all right, I'm interested in, so you are, in a bookshop, we find Mark Smith, the crime writer in the crime space. Now, this is what we would call a thriller rather than the crime novel. Talk about what that means to you. Do you set out to write a thriller? Are you okay with sitting in the crime space? How does that land with you?
Probably need to talk to Julie up the back there, because booksellers need to be able to position your book in a place that it's going to sell. That's basically what a genre is where it sits on the shelves. So if they sit mine next to Chris Hammer, well, great, fine. Not a problem. I don't care. I honestly don't care where it sits, but I'm quite adamant that I don't write crime. I'm not remotely interested in writing crime. There's enough crime in the world for me as it is, without me adding to it by writing about it. So I want to write about things that are important to me. Crime is not important to me. But what I will do is I will write about something like climate and environment, but I will wrap it in a genre, and that genre is a thriller. So for me, the thriller is the Trojan horse. That's the means of getting the stuff through. And when you say, I was really pleased to say that it's not overly didactic. So the last thing that you want as readers is a writer pushing their beliefs down your throat. You don't want to be preached to. And I understand that implicitly, but I still want to get my message across. So I've got to be really careful about that. And a really great piece of advice that an editor gave me was, when you're writing about something, you think, writing about something you're really passionate about, that would be easier than writing about something, something other. But she said, no, it's actually more difficult because you want to shout, but you have to whisper. So you're whispering in the ears through your characters. The moment you hear my voice, throw the book away. You should be hearing the characters speaking about this. So that's what, and in terms of wrapping it in a thriller, that's what keeps you turning the page. It's that, I want to find out, you become attached to that character. I think you become attached to Meg, and you feel what she's feeling, and you want to know that she's okay. You want to know that she gets through it or not.
Yeah, absolutely, and you do absolutely sort of go with her on that. I think that's just quickly drilling down onto that thriller versus crime thing again. as I was reading your book, it was striking me that really a thriller is a book that resists authority, whereas a crime novel seems to be something that is almost celebratory of authority, which is fine. But it's they're just different types of things. Is that a sort of a classification that I've just made up and it's rubbish, or is it sort of something that sits true with you?
I think it sits pretty true. You've just made it up, but it sits pretty true.
Oh, absolutely, 100% made up.
I don't, for me, crime is there's a murder, there's a body found at the beginning, then there's a police procedural that slowly puts together the clues and either does or doesn't decide at the end who done it. That to me is crime. There is crime in this book. Like the explosion of the bomb is a crime. The people that come after Meg, because it's not just the police that are after it, she discovers. There's other malevolent forces at work as well who are coming after her. So there's crime there, but that's not the pivot for the story. It's not what underlies the story. It's that idea that that I want to hold the reader in there. That's the thriller element. I want to hold you in there. I don't want to let you go. There are too many other distractions in the world, so I've got to work really hard. And I've often heard it said, almost in a disparaging manner, oh, your book was a real page-turner. Like you're thinking Mills and Byrne, a real page-turner. Never, ever underestimate how difficult it is to write a page-turner. It is so hard to write a page-turner. And so it's interesting because it takes you like 2.5, 3 years to write a book, and someone comes and says, oh, I loved your book. I read it in a day. Great.
I said that. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. 3 years of my life, but to me, that's a compliment.
It's awesome, right? Yeah. It is a really good thing. Do you think about that? I mean, literally as a page turner. So, do you actually literally think about how do you sort of look at the tension, the rise and fall of the tension as you're writing it? How do you manage that?
I think having been a young adult writer has stood me in really good stead for writing thrillers because as a young adult writer, you've got to get pacing right. Pacing has got to be spot on or you will lose those kids. It's actually harder. I think it's harder to write for them than it is to write for adults. But if you bring those same skills to adult writing, someone very early on said that writing thrillers is about three things. It's about pacing, pacing, and pacing. So you get that sense, and I'm not a planner. I don't plan it out. I'm just pantsing it. So I get a really strong sense of when something needs to happen. But it can't just be action, 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 because that's not real. But what it does need to be is, those superannuation graphs that you get where it goes up and then it goes down, it goes up and goes. That's what it's like to write a thriller. There's got to be those breathing spaces in there. It also gives you the chance for a little bit of commentary and maybe a little bit of humour. Throw in a little bit of humour as well before you take off again. And I think that's the art of writing a good story, number one, but in particular a thriller.
Excellent. Questions soon, not yet. About another 10 minutes or so. So yeah, like I'm saying, keep thinking about it. I just want to talk about place really quickly because you're obviously you write a lot about where we are, and there's obviously Melbourne in this, but there's the Otways that features in the camp that Meg goes to at the start of the book. Was there a specific area you were thinking of there, or were you kind of just Otways generally, having also done a book where Otways generally is where it was?
Yeah. So Meg goes to a training camp, which is where she joins up with this group, No Planet B. And at the training camp, there are about 10 other people. No one is allowed to say anything about who they are, what their real name is, where they come from, so that they can all stay as anonymous from each other as possible. And then they become a cell, and the cell takes part in the actions, like the one that happens in Melbourne. So having a camp, that was pretty easy for me. I ran a camp. I ran a residential campus down at Santa Monica. So, and that camp was it's in my head. Like I know that place so well. So, for most of my writing, this is the same as why would I go and create somewhere entirely new when I've got somewhere already? And all I have to do is relate that to my audience. So in my young adult novels, they're set in a small coastal town on the Great Ocean Road, So, and that's basically my town where I live. And I just changed the name and change the street names, but it's basically the same place. And the thing is, writing is hard, so why wouldn't you do anything you can to make it easier? And part of that for me is locating it somewhere that I'm intimately familiar with, because I know I will write that better than if I create somewhere entirely new. So yeah, place is, in fact, in the writing process for me, I will often begin with setting, I'll begin with place, like the river in this one, and then I'm guaranteed I'll find the characters. So I began on the river, and then the characters just slowly come together one by one. So a lot of writers will do it the other way around. They've got a character in mind. How can I build a story around that character? For me, place is critical to the whole thing.
And I think the thing I'd want to add to that is that it's the familiarity of it. But there's a clear, I think, love for these areas that you have, I think, in your work. And I think through your activism too, that's been the local activism that I think you've done in sort of the Surf Coast and so forth over time. What does it mean for you to be able to write about places you love in that way? That seems like something that I would, what does it mean to you?
It means a lot. I mean, I've felt invested in places like the Otways. Again, I was part of the campaign that stopped native forest logging in the Otways in the 1990s. I was on community radio here, had an environmental program on community radio where we would, bring in people from Vic Forest and campaigners against what they were doing, and we'd sit them in the studio together, and we had to really study up to be able to do those sorts of interviews. So I had an investment. I've got a really strong investment. I've walked some parts of those Otways, the Great Ocean Walk, literally, especially the section from Blanket Bay through to Joanna, literally 100 times. I know that because we ran more than 100 programs with students, and that's one of the walks that we did. So I know it intimately. And the thing that I realised when I was doing that so often is, the way you can just get used to things, but every single time that walk was different. Every single time it was different. The wind was different, or the conditions, something that I noticed that I hadn't seen before. And a lot of what a writer does is not sweeping landscapes. It's the small detail that brings the reader into the scene. It's the feeling of the sand between the toes, or rather than how big the waves are, or the ship out on the horizon. It's what's close to the protagonist, to your characters. So, and I love doing that. And I think I can only do that by being really intimately connected to that environment myself, and having experienced what my character is experiencing in that space.
Excellent. Right, we're going to do a reading now. Just to sort of mix it up a little bit, I think just to give you a sense of the book there.
Okay, so the context for this is that Meg has finished at the training camp, and she's making her way back to Melbourne. She's on the train.
And I have a little follow-up question after this that I'll be asking, of course.
The train was packed. Meg managed to get a window seat, a large woman next to her and a tall man who took up most of the legroom opposite them. She had wrangled her pack into the overhead rack, the straps dangling over the side. "Off to the footy?" the woman inquired. "Nah, work, unfortunately." "Big game today, Collingwood at the G." "Ah," Meg said. "Need to consolidate our position in the top four," the woman continued, undeterred. "Injuries are killing us, but Dangerfield's out again, groin this time." Meg had no idea of what she was talking about. There was a whole language around sport she'd never learned. Her dad spoke it fluently. He and Adam would occasionally watch a game together, commenting on the play between beers. "Who do you follow, love?" the woman asked. Meg hesitated. "Not really a footy person," she said, opening the novel she'd been holding. It was a new release by a writer she liked, Rhett Davis. "More of a reader." She tilted the book towards the window as though she needed more light. The woman took the hint, pushed buds into her ears, scrolled her phone.
Thank you. That's an excellent choice of reading that I didn't make him do at all. What I would like to know...
Can I just add something there? Because I'm sure that... No, you ask your question first. I'll tell you my anecdote.
Okay, all right. We might be asking the same question. If it's a new book this writer has written, can you tell us what it's about? Because I'd love to know myself. I'm sort of struggling a bit now, so any inspiration would be great.
Well, this is going to blend in. This is a perfect segue because I was at a music event towards the end of last year, and at interval I went out to get a drink, and there's a woman lining up behind me, and she sticks her head around and she says, "Oh, you're that writer. You're that writer." I said, "Yeah, I'm a writer." She said, "I love your work." She said, "Arborescence, one of my favourite books." I said, "I'll tell Rhett Davis that when I see him." I think it was Arborescence that the woman that she was reading.
Well, that's okay. So it's one that's okay. That's already been done. I had the same experience with someone. What's his name? Will Anderson. Suddenly, so I thought I was Will Anderson. It was just the weirdest thing. Absolutely convinced. And I didn't correct her. I thought, I'm going to make Will look bad now. Okay. I just want to. We've got a few minutes left before we've got some more audience questions. So I kind of want to, you've probably talked about this a little bit, but I'm really interested in this idea of moving from YA to adult fiction. I know that was a really big sort of gutsy move, I think, for you to do, because you were well known in the YA space, and moving into another space like that can be quite, publishers can be initially like, oh, I don't know about that. I'm just interested in how you've had to change as a writer in moving into sort of more the thrillers. How has that changed you?
Yeah, it was a fraught process because I'd written 4 books for my publisher, all YA books. They'd been successful. They're on curriculum in schools. And when I wanted to write an adult novel, stretch my wings a little bit more as a writer, they said, "Okay, yeah, go ahead and write it." And when I did write it, they said, "Well, we're going to pass. We don't want that." So then I had a decision to make, which was, okay, because they made it very clear if I wanted to continue to write YA, they'd be happy to support me. They'd give me another contract, go right ahead, Mark. But I wanted to do something else, so I had to just leave. I had to fly solo, and I had nothing. I'm not sure that readers always understand just how very, very difficult it is to get published in Australia. It's so very difficult. And so once you've got your foot in the door of a publisher, you don't want to let it go because you might not find another one. So I had the manuscript. It was the Three Boys Gone manuscript, and I got connected through that writing community you're talking about, through Mark Brandy, who's a mate, put me on to an agent, and the agent loved it, and then the agent sold it, and so it I was very lucky that it rolled on in that way. But the big difference between writing for young adults and writing for adults is that when I'm writing for young adults, the people who buy my books are not my readers. The people who buy my books are teachers, parents, librarians, grandparents. So it's a harsh term, but gatekeepers is a word that's often used. And that means that you've got to get your books past those gatekeepers and into the hands of your readers, but still have that book edgy enough for the kids to like it. And that's a really, really hard balancing act. So there's all of those constraints that you have when you're writing young adult about the sorts of things that you can explore, the language that you can use, and the way in which you can depict relationships between characters. All of those things are kind of restricting you. That doesn't mean that you can't write great young adult books, but when you're writing in the adult area, those constraints aren't there. They simply don't exist, and so it's very liberating to write, almost too liberating in a way, because you can just sort of
ask, is it a little scary in that way? Is it also that sort of a wide open field all of a sudden?
Yeah, suddenly, I knew the space I was writing into before, and it was quite a narrow space, but I knew how to do it. And suddenly that space is a lot wider, and there's a lot more competition. And the last one of the parting words from my publisher, from my original publisher, were, you'll never make the money you make, in writing adult as you would in young adult. And it's true, because young adults is obviously in school libraries, and if you get your book on curriculum, which is the golden ticket, it just keeps turning over year after year after year after year. And that doesn't happen with an adult book. You've probably got 3 months to get the book out there, publicise it as much as you can, hope that it has a long tail, hope that it gets into book clubs and gets some good reviews, and even then, a year later, that's probably the end of that book. And that doesn't happen with YA. So it's a scarier space to write into, but it also opens up a whole new audience for me as well.
You were talking a bit about that sort of literary community, in particular, that sort of idea of, the literary community sort of being part of that transition for you. But you've done things with the short story and anthologies with the, the Minds Go Walking and the Nick Cave anthology and the Kylie Minogue. Were you involved in the Kylie one? But the Nick Cave and the Paul Kelly ones. And that's obviously a huge sort of community sort of bringing together of writers. But I suppose I'm interested in how you, how important these literary communities, the writing communities as well as the reading communities are to you as a human.
Yeah, obviously hugely important. The best advice I can ever give to emerging writers, new writers, is get out. Like go to other people's launches, make connections. Don't talk to them about your work. Just make the connections with them and support them, because then when the time comes, they will support you. So so we've got a book, I've got the manuscript, I've finished the manuscript and I send it off to the publisher and it goes through the editing process, and the publisher says, because it's generally the author's responsibility, who can you get to put their name on this to say what a great book it is? So I've got to go out into my community and I've got to pull on all of those favours that I've built up over the years, and we've been very lucky in the past that Three Boys Gone had Jane Harper on the cover. This one's got Sally Hepworth on the cover, and there's others endorsements inside it. And you might think, well, that doesn't mean a lot, but it does to readers. It does when you're looking at those books on the shelf. You're thinking, what's going to distinguish that book from that book? And if Jane Harper says, or Sally Hepworth says, what did she say? A superb and twisty thriller. That's going to influence the punter. So the community, and it's not just that. It's you get used to rejection as a writer. You really do. It's a tough gig, and it's always good to know that there are other writers. We're all in the same boat. And there's literally, you'd think that there'd be professional jealousy, that someone's book is doing better than mine, but honestly, it doesn't exist. It's not there, because everybody knows that just because your book is successful doesn't mean that mine won't be too. Because readers read more than one book, and they'll move on. So that having that community, and especially when you have, if you're having a tough time, if your publisher's not interested, or they've passed on your contract, or you're not getting a decent advance, it's not worth your while, you're struggling to make a living out of it, that community is hugely supportive. And I've found that. But it's all because of the hard work. You've got to lay the foundation as well. And that's what I mean by connecting with all of those people. I became very adept at just walking up to authors and saying, "Hi, I'm Mark. How you going? I love your work," and speaking to them about their work. And that then creates the connection. Example of that was I wouldn't have got my agent without Mark Brandy, who I had done a few gigs with and had interviewed as well, and doing things like you're doing. And so I was able to say to him, "Hey, Mark," and he said, "Oh yeah, this guy." And that's the way that it works. But you can't do that without the networking first.
Excellent. I'm jealous of everyone. Pretty much in that. No, I'm not. The audience questions, maybe we can sort of, if you have got some questions for Mark here, that would be great. We'll have a little mic sort of roving around. We've got one over here. Thank you. Just wait for the mic and then thank you very much.
Mark, I've loved both your books. What are you working on now?
We were just talking about this before we came on. It sounds strange, but it's the best part of writing is what I'm doing at the moment, because I'm in a new book and I'm just making shit up You know, like I'm going down to the desk every morning, and it's just, and there's stuff coming. I don't know how good it is, or because I do believe that the book reveals itself to you as you go along. But that is the best bit for me, the creating of it. And I know I'm writing. I wrote a scene this morning that I guarantee won't make it into the final book. It'll be edited out 100%. But I really enjoyed writing it. And so when you're in that space, that's where I'm at the moment. So I've probably got about 30,000 words. And the book, you know, these are probably 70,000 words, so nearly halfway there. And provided it keeps rolling the way that it is, it's another thriller. It's set in Tasmania this time. There is, of course, there's an environmental aspect to it, which is an offshore wind farm, which is being proposed to be built off the coast of what I call the turquoise coast on Tassie. And I might bring in salmon farms yet too. I'm not sure, but quite possibly.
Good stuff. Any other questions here for Mark? Hello, we've got one up the front. Just wait for the mic coming around there. Thank you.
Just a comment, Mark. I'd like to have a conversation with you because I was probably the senior officer at a lot of those demonstrations. We probably have a different point of view. One of the best photos that I've got is when nuclear ships were coming into the port here in Geelong. Must have been back in the mid-90s, and splashed across the front page of the Geelong Advertiser. I was teaching at Geelong High School at the time, and splashed across the front page of the Geelong Advertiser was Mr. Smith with the police holding, one arm each and marching me off the pier where we've been trying to get onto the pier to speak to the captain of the ship. I had 99% of I had a great relationship with the police because I was part of the organisation of lots of those things too. And it's interesting because the difference in the demonstration, I talked about the big one when the Israeli president came in. That's when there was a shocking violence up in the Sydney ones. And in Victoria, in Melbourne, police were just quietly just wandering their way through the crowd, saying hello, being respectful. There was a great relationship there between them, and that's how you make it work. People have a right to demonstrate, but of course they have a right. They shouldn't be overly disruptive, or they shouldn't be causing damage. And that relationship in my history of demonstrations has always been really good.
Excellent. We've got one question at the back. You're next. One question at the back.
Am I at the back?
Yeah. Sorry. Yes, you're at the back. Yes. Sort of. Close enough to the back.
I'm just interested, Mark. When did you start writing, and how did you orientate yourself to this level? Because I demolished that in 12 hours.
Right.
Yesterday. I thought I'd better read it before I got in.
That guy I was talking about that I was driving around Geelong with. I started writing when I was working, when I was still working as a teacher. I was running a residential campus, it was all 15-year-old boys, and I knew that the vast majority of them weren't reading. They were not reading, like zip. They might read what they were forced to read on curriculum, but otherwise they weren't reading. So my first book, The Road to Winter, actually came out of that experience, which was sitting down with 15-year-old boys and say, well, what would you read? And not surprisingly, they just want a good character, they want a fast story, they want action, a no-brainer. And that's where that writing evolved. Because it was a residential campus, I had lots of evening supervision. Kids would go to bed and I'd be up for another couple of hours, so I used that as writing time. I started writing on weekends, on public holidays, on school holidays. I had a strong commitment that I had a story that I wanted to tell, and I just had to find the way of doing that. And I didn't actually set out to be necessarily a YA writer. I set out to be a writer,
And because I actually began by writing short stories, and I was very lucky. I had a lot of short stories published before I wrote a novel. But everything that I learnt from short story writing, I brought into writing a novel. And I don't think I would have been able to write The Road to Winter had I not written 20 or 30 short stories beforehand, which weren't YA, they were all literary fiction. So I was bringing those writing skills into long form. I never believed I could write a novel. No way. That's why I stuck to short stories for so long. It just seemed too hard, too long, and it wasn't until I did this course, which was stupidly named A Novel in a Year, but I believed it, and I did. I actually wrote a manuscript in a year. I stopped writing short stories completely and just worked really hard on that one manuscript, and I ended up with 90,000 words. And it was published at 58,000 words. So you know how much of it was complete shite. Didn't make it through.
So Road to Winter was the first novel attempt. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. I've never started a novel that I haven't finished. Like I've got nothing in the bottom drawer. It's empty.
Wow.
Completely empty.
Lucky you. That's good.
Just because I'm stubborn.
That's great. Sorry, there's more questions potentially. Oh, another one at the back. It's further back this time. A couple more rows back.
Thanks for a really interesting talk, Mark. I'm interested in hearing about the books, but I was struck by your grasp of or ability to convey the practicalities and the economics of the practice of the craft, because I think a lot of readers just do not understand that side of writing and publishing. I've got a 10-year-old granddaughter, and I've noticed that she's increasingly drawn to graphic novels, and in the YA space in the last 20 to 30 years there's been a huge explosion of that genre. So I'd just be interested in hearing your thoughts on that and any insights into that.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously I've written into that kids and YA space quite a bit. And I do a lot of work in schools still. I do probably 50 or 60 schools a year, school visits, we're running workshops and presenting around my own books. And I talk a lot with librarians. I always try and get to the library in the school. And now, as you rightly pointed out, as opposed to 10 or 15 years ago, there's a whole graphic novel section. And that's because, I think it's because so many kids now are a visual they understand stories visually as much as they do, probably more than they do as the written word. And I think that's growing up with, they've grown up with Netflix and visual storytelling. My storytelling when I was a kid was oral storytelling. That's what I heard on the radio, and it's what we bandied about between ourselves. Now they are much more visual, and it's why I think so many more books which are being written by millennials and beyond they're really cinematic in the way in which they're written, the style in which they're written. It's like really strong visuals that you have in your head when you're reading it, and whatever gets people reading, I don't care. I always used to say to the kids down at the campus, read the sports pages. I don't care. As long as you're reading, read it. And if graphic novels are part of that equation, fantastic. They should go for it.
Excellent. We have one down the front here. Just down here. Got room for a couple more questions, I think.
Sorry?
Thank you both so much. Very insightful conversation. I'm just wondering what a typical writing day looks like for you.
I write in blocks. So I block out in my calendar, I block out 2 weeks or 3 weeks, whatever. And my writing day is I get up at about 6:30 and I go down and I write for 3 hours. And in that 3 hours I can get 1,000 words, 1,500 words, and I'm finished by 9 o'clock, 9:30, that's it. The rest of the day is my own, so I can go for a surf, I can walk the dog, I can do whatever. I'm in an immensely privileged position to be able to do that because I don't have to work full time, I don't have kids at home. How writers do that, and I know a lot of writers that do, how they do it, I've got no idea. But the other thing is, and again, Rhett and I were talking about this earlier, is that I do a lot of what I call writing away from the desk. So that is, sure I'm finished my actual writing on the screen by 9:30, but for the rest of the day I'm ticking over. So by the time I go back the next morning, I know exactly where I am, I know exactly what I want to do, and I know exactly where I'm going to pick up and run with it again. And it doesn't always, this Brooks, the writer herself, with the book coming out later this year. Yeah, you'd know yourself that sometimes you go down there to your desk and it's like pulling teeth, like it's so hard. And other times you go down there and it just seems to flow out of you. The thing that I've realised is that when I go back over a manuscript, I can't tell the difference between the days when I thought it was really hard and the days when I thought it was really easy. So in other words, what that tells me is the writing's still the same. It's just the way you're thinking about that writing on a particular day, which is different. So I get those blocks done, and I try to. This is the other thing that readers probably don't always understand, is that like when I was editing Where Truth Ends, I was beginning to write the new one as well, because you're kind of on a hamster wheel, and you want to stay on there. So by the time I came to the publicity tour for this, I probably had 15,000 words of a new one, which then I didn't look at for maybe 3 months, and then I come back to it, pick it up, realise that most of it's rubbish, but I can probably salvage something out of it and continue writing. So it's a continuous, ongoing process, and trying not to slip behind as much as possible.
You talked a little bit about the sort of the fallow period between novels. Do you want to just sort of talk about that really quickly? Because I think that's a really interesting idea too, because I think people just expect that you're going to go straight into the next one.
Yeah.
You sort of are, but not really, right?
Yeah. The biggest question writers get is, where do you get your ideas from? Where do you get your ideas from? And for me, it's just living life and being observant and just seeing things and thinking, there's something there. Jot it down, hang on to it. It'll fit in somewhere. So and it's the little things that readers they'll go, I understand, I can see that. It's the little details. And so it's just being observant about life. And for me, that fallow period is when I'm stewing on ideas for a new novel. And so I'll be reading a lot. I'll be reading a lot of other writers. I'll be getting out. I'll be doing stuff. I'll be trying to socialise. I'll be, and doing all the things that I do anyway and fitting them into my day. And I will be stewing, like I said, and eventually I'll come up with 2 or 3 ideas, and then I'll sort of gel into, this is the one that I think I can make a big story out of. Even then, because I'm a pantser, I know I'm going to be making it up anyway, but...
I'm generally staggered by the idea that you're a pantser with the various sort of structure you have in here. But anyway, that's... I think we're out of time, unfortunately. Thank you for a lovely chat, Mark. Julie from Dimmicks is over there selling copies of Where Truth Ends, along with Mark's other titles. So you can purchase a copy and have it signed before you leave. I'm sure Mark will be doing that for us. And of course, Where Truth Ends is available to be borrowed from the library too. Thank you all for joining us this evening. And on behalf of Geelong Regional Libraries, we hope to see you again soon. Please join me in thanking Mark Smith.
Thank you. Thanks, Rhett.